Hi book lovers, welcome back to my channel. I am finally doing my August wrap up. It's a bit late again. I even had someone on Twitter ask me when this wrap up was coming, and it's finally here today. I read 24 books in August. It was a bit of a slower month for me, at least for reading. Listened to a ton of audiobooks, but yeah, my reading has definitely slowed. So here are the 24 books that I read in August, starting with An Extraordinary Union by Alyssa Cole. This book was actually our book club read for August for Ravished by Romance, which I host with my friend Jessica, Peace Love Books. We did a live chat for it, so if you missed it and you want to watch it, I'll leave a link to it down below. Usually I do read my books a little bit closer to the date of the live chat, which is around like the last weekend of the month. This one I had borrowed from my library and I couldn't renew it because some people had it on hold after me, so I just figured might as well listen to it now instead of waiting another 6 weeks. This is a historical romance set during the Civil War. I gave this one 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. It was my first historical from Alyssa Cole, and now I want to read all the historical romances from her. The main characters here are both working for the Union Army. The heroine, who is a black woman, she becomes a slave in the South to spy for the Union Army. The hero is a white man. He's another undercover agent, and for their latest missions, they both come across each other. Alyssa Cole doesn't hold back on the details and the history of this Civil War setting. There is no whitewashing. You will get mad on Elle's behalf. You'll get mad at the way that the other characters see her as less than because she's a black woman. I really enjoyed Alyssa Cole's writing in this one. The romance was really sweet, despite how forbidden their love was, despite how so many things wanted to prevent them from ever being together. Malcolm is swoony. He falls hard and fast for Elle. There's also a ton of suspense. I mean, these two characters are undercover agents, and there's a bit of action mainly towards the end as well. Next, I ended up reading 3 Jessica novellas. She's been releasing so many novellas, smutty novellas every month, which makes me so happy. So I read 3 of them in August: The Fighter's Prize, The Kingpin's Weakness, and Suddenly His. The Fighter's Prize was my favorite of the 3. I gave this one 4 stars. We have an MMA fighter, a Russian hero, who of course, as soon as he meets the heroine, falls instantly and madly in love. The heroine is actually the one who goes to him. Her father's in a lot of debt. He put a wager on Maxim's fight, and now the heroine needs Maxim to win, so she goes to him to try to persuade him to win with her body. Of course, she's super virginal and innocent, but he doesn't really care about that. He wants her anyway. This one was really great. It was hot. It was exactly what I want in a Jessica novella, so yeah, I really enjoyed it. The Kingpin's Weakness is kind of a sequel to The Fighter's Prize. This one is about the last heroine's sister. Here we have a kingpin gangster hero who was introduced in the last book along with the sister. He takes her away to his private box seat during one of the MMA fights. I really wanted to love this one because I love the way they were introduced in The Fighter's Prize, but it ended up being just okay. It was a 3-star read. Suddenly His was also another 3-star read. The heroine cleans houses, and one of the houses belongs to our CEO, billionaire hero. She doesn't know though that he is completely obsessed with her and has been ever since she was first hired. Things take a little bit of a twisty turn when she ends up at this party with some friends. She ends up being auctioned against her will. This one was a little weird, but still a hot and fun time. I almost forgot, but there were actually 4 Jessica novellas that I read. The last one is Hefty. Hefty is the second book of hers with a thick hero. I think she started this trend of hers with Husky, and then she released another thick hero novella earlier in September. This was one of her sweeter novellas, but still, I mean, hot. It's set during high school, which is a little weird, but I do believe both of them were 18. He's on the football team. She's the head cheerleader. He is her best friend's older brother. This was just really cute and adorable. I really like this one. I love the fact that she's writing more big fat heroes, and I gave this one 4 stars. Next Next up, I read You Had Me at Hola by Alexis Daria. This one I had really high hopes for, but it didn't quite live up to them. First off though, this cover is absolutely beautiful, but I give this one 3.5 stars. It showed a lot of promise, but I got a little bit frustrated, especially with the hero. Jasmine and Ashton are two Latinx main characters. They've just been cast in this Netflix-esque new show. Jasmine and Ashton don't get along quite as well as they would hope they would. Their chemistry is just not happening while they're filming. Part of the reason is that Ashton is very, very guarded. He has some secrets and he's extremely paranoid about those secrets leaking into the public. So he lives a very, very private life and doesn't open up to anybody. The show ends up hiring an intimacy coach for these two to work on their chemistry. Then these two start to rehearse their scripts in private, and that's when things start to build up and heat up. Sadly, this is when things also start to die down a bit for me because Ashton is just so frustratingly paranoid that he doesn't allow any of the romance to actually move on to another level. There's a lot of back and forth because of him, and I was starting to feel bad for Jasmine. So the romance was sadly not really my favorite part of this book. I did actually love the show that they were working on. We do get to see some scripts in some chapters, and it's a second chance romance, and sometimes I was actually even more invested in that fake romance rather than Ashton and Jasmine's romance. My favorite part of this book though was probably the entire cast of characters. It's a very diverse group of characters. We have Jasmine's entire family. She has a really great female friendship with her close relatives. Even Ashton's family are very close and very supportive of him. The other members of the cast of the show were all fantastic. They made this Latinx rom-com really feel real. So I wish I could have loved this one more. There are still some really great parts to it, but also some really frustrating parts, at least for me, and that's why I just balanced out into a 3.5-star read. I finally read my first Ruby Lang book in Playing House. This is the first standalone in the Uptown series. It's more of a novella, honestly, and it's a romance between Asian main characters. This one I gave 3 stars, mainly because the romance didn't quite do it for me. Novellas are a bit tricky for me. I usually mostly enjoy them when they're smutty novellas with like no plot, or they're novellas that are part of a series that I've already read and loved. In this novella, I really wanted Oliver and Faye to spend more time together, especially since there's so few pages in this novella. I wanted them to actually be together more often. It was still really cute though when they actually were together. They're both obsessed with historical buildings, obsessed with architecture, so they reconnect when they are both at the same viewing for some real estate, and from then on they start setting up some dates together to view more open buildings, open real estate, and for some of them they even pretend to be a couple that are interested in buying the building or buying the house. So that part was really fun and sweet, but I did get really bored anytime the story would focus more on their individual issues. I just wasn't as into those parts that I was the romance, so this one was 3 stars. I ended up listening to a bunch of Alexandria House books, 4 of them, well 3 plus a novella. The novella is Let Me Please You, which is the last book, like book 4.5 in the McLean Brothers series. This novella is about the one and only McLean sister. I love the series, I love the McLean brothers, and I really enjoyed the sister story as well. This is a bodyguard romance. We have a bodyguard hero. Tommy is a bodyguard for Everett and Leland, and by extension the heroine Kat. This novella was hot and sweet. We kind of already got a glimpse of their romance in either book 2 or 3, but now we get the full story. There's a bit of a forbidden aspect with Tommy not wanting to cross that professional line, but these two were great together. I'm glad that we actually got their full story. I also ended up reading and finishing the Strickland Sisters series by Alexandria House. Okay, I had to do a change of scenery, but continuing on with the Strickland Sisters series, book 1 is Stay With Me. Angela is a natural hair vlogger, Ryan is a corporate man and a self-professed player. This one was another great Alexandria House book. It did take me a little while to warm up to the hero just because I'm not the biggest fan of player heroes, and usually I'm used to her insta-love like the hero. As soon as he sees the heroine, like Alexandria House heroes, he goes all in, but Ryan does take a little bit of time. I did really like the setup though. Ryan is renting out an apartment that Angela owns. Eventually though, Ryan does become a fully reformed player and Angela is it for him. The audiobook was good except for the fact that the hero's accent would change a bit throughout the audio. The narrators never really matched the same accent for the hero, so that was a little bit funny to listen to, but this was a great first book to a series. I loved how the three sisters were introduced and it got me really excited for the next two books in the series. Believe in Me is book 2 and is Renee's story. Renee has finally divorced her cheating husband, who we found out was cheating on her in book 1. She's a midwife and at the beginning of the book she helps deliver a baby from a teen mom. She ends up falling for the mom's brother, Lorenzo, who is quite the mystery. He's got a mysterious and fascinating past. These two are amazing together. I loved it. This is probably my favorite of the series. I also gave this one 4 stars. Zoe is just so hot and protective and adoring of Renee. He wants to give her everything, give her the world, especially after what she dealt with her awful husband. The chemistry is great. It's another hot read from Alexandria House. Lorenzo is definitely the pursuer in this relationship and goes hard after Renee, who is a bit hesitant after leaving her cheating husband. But Lorenzo is just the swooniest, so wonderful with her. I loved him. I love them together. And then the last book of the series is Be With Me, about the youngest sister, Nikki. I really wanted to love this one because it's friends to lovers, but then I started the book and it turned out to be so messy. I ended up giving it 3 stars because even though it was messy, I still couldn't really put it down. Nicole is the youngest sister and she is quite spoiled. All she wants to do is marry someone rich so she never has to work in her life again, which is why she's currently engaged to Travis, who is a wealthy attorney. But in actuality, Nikki is in love with her best friend Damon and has been in love with him since they were in high school together. Damon has also been in love with Nikki since forever, but made a huge mistake towards the end of high school, which prevented Nikki from ever actually going for a relationship between them. But even though Damon broke her heart, that's never stopped them from continuing a sexual relationship. No matter if either person was in a relationship with another person, they would still continually hook up throughout the years. So these two are basically cheaters. They've cheated on their significant others countless times for each other, and Nikki is currently cheating on her fiance to be with Damon. So like I said, it is messy. Damon thankfully realizes that he is tired of all this cheating and wants to just be with Nikki, full stop. It takes quite a while for this to actually happen. I wish I could have loved him more, but not even Alexandria House could make me love these two cheating characters. Next up were my reads for the Historical Romance Readathon round 2. I won't go into too much detail for these because I did a whole vlog for that weekend, but I read Lady Sophia's Lover by Lisa Kleypas, which was our buddy read for the readathon. This one was so good. I give it 4 stars. This one is book 2 in the Bow Street Runner series, but perfectly fine as a standalone. I have read book 1 though, but I think I love this one just a little bit more, mainly because of Ross, our hero. He is so adoring and protective of Sophia, our heroine. This book is probably one of Lisa Kleypas's hottest books, at least from the ones that I've read so far, but the chemistry was on fire since page 1. Ross is just so lusting of Sophia, and Sophia wants him back, but what Ross doesn't know that Sophia actually wants revenge against Ross, that she's applying for a job on Bow Street to get closer to Ross. This one had so much steam. I love the connection between Sophia and Ross. There's also a bit of excitement going on, especially since the Bow Street Runners are essentially like a police task force. This was another great book from Lisa Kleypas, who is of course one of my all-time faves. My second book for the readathon was Rebel by Beverly Jenkins. This is the first book in the Woman Who Dare series and takes place during the years right after the Civil War. This one I gave 3 stars, maybe 3.5. I just had a really hard time getting into the story, getting into the audiobook. Like, I would have to rewind a couple times, restart a chapter over just because I wasn't paying attention. I just could not get into the story as much as I wanted to. Here, Belinda, the heroine, she's a teacher. Her passion in life is educating people. Sadly, she finds her school trashed by vandals who don't want black people to be educated. She finds herself being attacked by these vandals and is almost raped when she is saved by our hero, Captain Drake Levesque. Drake's family, the Levesques, end up helping Belinda after she's evicted from her home, which means Belinda and Drake are living quite close to each other. It's a bit of insta-love, except that Drake doesn't realize that it's love until towards the end of the book. There's a fake fiance of Belinda's who she's actually a beard for. That doesn't stop Belinda and Drake from pursuing this passionate affair. I enjoy these 2 characters, I really like their passions, but again, I just had a really hard time getting into the story. And like all of Beverly Jenkins' other historicals, there is a lot of real life history woven into the story, both the good and the bad. And then the 3rd and last book that I read for the historical romance readathon is Prince Charming by Julie Garwood. This is one of her Western historical romance, though it mainly takes place in Boston. It's also a marriage of convenience with so much humor and charm that Julie Garwood is so good at dishing out. Taylor, our lady from London, she marries an American rancher named Lucas. These 2 have plans to move to America right after their marriage. Lucas is very much a Julie Garwood alpha male, and Taylor could not care less about that. She knows what she needs to do and goes after it. She also forms this really great female friendship with a woman she comes across during their boat trip to America. There's just so much going on in this really big book, but I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. Another historical I ended up reading, but not in time for the historical romance readathon. I read it after, but it is Delicious by Sherry Thomas. I was so excited about this one because it was a recommendation from Kennedy Ryan, and also it's a foodie historical romance. It's also a second chance romance with a secret identity, which all made for a fantastic combination. I love Sherry Thomas's writing, and she wrote another angsty historical romance in this one. Verity and Stuart once shared a passionate night together 10 years ago. Stuart was all but ready to marry her, even though he had no idea who she was. Unfortunately, she leaves him by dawn, and he has no way to ever find her or contact her again, at least not until 10 years later. Now, Verity is a fantastic chef, but when the master of the house that she's working at passes away, her brother comes to take over, and of course the brother is none other than Stuart. She never revealed her identity when she was with Stuart 10 years ago, so he has no idea that she is the one that he was going to offer marriage to, and she ends up hiding her face, veiling her face for quite a bit of the book, so he still isn't able to recognize her. He basically falls in love with her again through the incredible food that she makes. I loved the food aspect of this. The descriptions of how the food is made, how it's presented, and how delicious it is when Stuart eats it. It was just so well written. I love the angst of these 2 never forgetting each other, of wanting to be together again, but they can't because Verity doesn't want to hold Stuart back from his political aspirations. Delicious was so freaking good. I loved it. I gave it 4 stars. And then I read The Truest Thing by Samantha Young. This is the 4th and final book in the Hearts Boardwalk series. I've really enjoyed this small beach town romance series, and this final book between Emery and Jack has been a long time coming. I'm pretty sure they've been teased since book 1 or 2, and that was years and years ago. It's finally here, and it was quite the emotional read. We have an angsty and tortured romance that's been in the works for the 9 years that the heroine has lived in this small town. Emery is shy, bookish, and awkward. She moves to Hartwell about a decade ago. Jack, who's a local resident, he has wanted Emery, but he is pretty much the town man whore, and she deserves better than this one-time thing that he is guaranteed to deliver. Over the years and throughout the books, we see Jack kind of turning on his friends and working for his evil father. He turns into the bad guy he never wanted to be, but Emery sees who he is deep down. We get to see the relationship or non-relationship between Emery and Jack throughout the years. They are pretty much in love with each other throughout these years and up to the start of The Truest Thing. I was a little bit annoyed though when Jack continued to sleep around, no matter how much he hated it, and Emery did not, but thankfully in the present timeline in this book, he finally gets his head out of his ass and goes after Emery. He has a lot to make up for, so many amends to make, not just to Emery, but also his best friends. Jack is the definition of a tortured hero, and thankfully Emery does make him work for her love, though I would have loved if there was a little bit more groveling. This was a 4-star read, not my favorite of the series. That one still belongs to book 3, but still a really great ending to the series. Next I read Pulling Doubles by Christina C. Jones. This is book 2 in the Wright Brothers series. I read book 1 the month before, but didn't really fall in love with it. But I thought I'd give this next book a try, and thankfully I enjoyed it so much more. This is a black romance set in the medical field in gynecology. Devin is a nurse who's training to be a nurse practitioner, and she's currently interning and working for Dr. Joseph Wright, our hero. These two do not get along. Their personalities clash like crazy, and it doesn't help that there is a ton of chemistry between them. I really enjoyed the enemies to lovers vibes. I love that they go head to head all the time. I love the fact that it was set in the medical field. My main and only problem with this book though was that it ended pretty abruptly, which was also the same problem as book 1. I remember when I finished the audiobook, I was feeling like a that's it kind of feeling. It felt like I was in the middle of the book rather than the ending. By the time it ended, it just ended at a really strange place. I'm not a fan of abrupt endings, but other than that, this was a really great enemies to lovers romance. I gave this one 4 stars. I also read Like Lovers Do by Tracy Livesay. This is book 2 in the Girls Trip series, but totally fine as a standalone. I didn't even read book 1, but this one held up totally fine. This was a 4-star read. I enjoyed this one so much. This was my first book from Tracy Livesay. I've heard really good things about her first girls trip book. The premise of the series is that a group of black girlfriends, they meet up once a year to go on a girls trip, and the second one to get her story is Dr. Nicole Allen. She is an incredibly successful surgeon, and I admired her character so much. There are 2 of my favorite tropes in this one, friends to lovers and fake relationship. Nicole is roommates and friends with Ben, our hero, who is a very wealthy white man. Ben is a total cinnamon roll, just the absolute sweetest and nicest guy. These two end up making a little deal with each other during Ben's friend trip to Martha's Vineyard. He and Nicole will pretend to be in a relationship together to get Ben's ex off his back, and in return, Ben will ask his doctor parents to intervene on behalf of Nicole because her prestigious fellowship is in jeopardy. The romance is really sweet, but it does turn hot pretty quick, especially after some dirty texts. If you love nice guy heroes, you will love Ben. If you love successful heroines who prioritize work at first, but then realize there's more to life than just work, you will love Nicole. These two are fantastic together. I love the way their friendship slowly turned into something more, and now I am very excited to read the rest of the Girls Trip series. Next up were my 5 vampire romance books that I talk all about in my vampire romance video. I won't go into too much detail with these because I talk about them so much in that video, but I started off with Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer. I gave this one 4 stars. I enjoyed it so much. I was a huge fan of the Twilight series back then, and I remember being obsessed with the leaked chapters of Midnight Sun like 10-15 years ago, but I really didn't know what to expect in this actual book. But I'm so happy I ended up enjoying it so much. I loved being in Edward's point of view. I loved revisiting Forks and the whole Cullen family. I was just really happy and nostalgic reading this one. I'm glad Stephanie Meyer finally published it. I also read one of my most anticipated sequels of the year, which is A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire by Jennifer L. Armentrout. From Blood and Ash was one of my favorite books this year, so the hype for the sequel was real. I gave this one 4 stars. I loved it, but not quite as much as books from Blood and Ash. It's a bit slower paced with more world building, more character development, which does make sense for a second book in a fantasy romance series. I loved being back with Cass and Poppy, about learning more of this epic vampire world. The romance develops a little bit more, especially with this marriage of convenience. There is so much longing and so much heartache, especially after all these crazy reveals from book 1. I really enjoyed this follow-up. I loved getting to know Cass as Cass, and there is yet another cliffhanger ending in this book. It's very much a what the hell is going on kind of ending, but I loved it and I cannot wait to read book 3. I also read 2 J.R. Ward books, 2 Black Dagger Brotherhood books. First one is The Sinner. This one was 3 stars. Sadly, I didn't love it. It was just a bit too boring for my taste. I wasn't into the romance. I didn't really feel that much for Sin and Joe Early. It is nice being back in the Black Dagger Brotherhood world, but the romances just aren't doing it for me as much. Though I do think this book finally finishes up the Destroyer arc, with Butch being the Destroyer. Butch is not my favorite. I mean, I like seeing him from time to time, but these latest few books have focused on him a little too much. The other J.R. Ward book was The Jackal, which is the first book in the new spin-off series, which is set in the vampire prison camps. I did not like this one. I gave it 2 stars. I was so frustrated with the heroine that she just brought the whole story down for me. I was excited to read about Rage's half-brother, but I mean, I liked him more than the heroine, but he definitely did not live up to his brother. Nyx was just naive and borderline stupid for me, constantly making the dumbest decisions. So this first spin-off book was a huge disappointment. And then the last vampire romance that I read is actually young adult, and that is Crave by Tracy Wolff. Sadly, I did not enjoy this one either. I gave this one 2 stars as well. I wish I could have loved it. And it was promising at first. I was enjoying it, but then it got pretty boring. I just didn't see the point of what was going on and why it needed to be so long. There's a romance with, of course, a bad boy vampire hero. The romance was fine. It didn't really make me feel anything, so I didn't care for it that much. I didn't hate any of the characters, but it was a very underwhelming book. I probably won't be reading the sequel, especially if it's another 600 pages. Okay, I just checked Amazon and it's actually 700 pages, so that's gonna be a no. And the last book that I read in August was Heartbones by Colleen Hoover. This is basically a beach read. It takes place on the beach, except it's not quite happy and fluffy. It is Colleen Hoover after all. This is a new adult romance. I gave it 4 stars. It was surprisingly an easy and quick read for me. Usually Colleen Hoover books get pretty intense and emotional. I like the main characters. I enjoyed Bea, Bea's family, and Samson, but the romance was not really my favorite. Bea, the heroine, grew up in poverty with a drug-addicted mother. Her mom has just overdosed and died, and even though she's very close to leaving for college, she needs a place to stay in the meantime, and that's when she goes to live with her estranged father and his new family. Her next door neighbor is rich boy Samson, who has a very mysterious past. They have a very sweet romance, sweet developing romance along the beach, but Bea knows that Samson is hiding some really big things from her, which all come out in a huge plot twist towards the end. I did not see this twist coming. I wouldn't say it's crazy or anything, but definitely unexpected. I really enjoyed Bea's character development. She comes into this home broken from her traumatic past, but learns to let love in and let her family in. She has a new stepsister, and I actually loved the fact that they formed this really nice friendship. If you want a beach read that's more on the emotional, depressing side, this one is perfect. I do wish though that it was longer, or we had like an epilogue. I just thought that there was a lot more to explore, especially after the big plot twist, but it does end on a really sweet note. And that's it for my August wrap up. 24 books. Let me know if you've read any of these, if you loved any of them. As always, links for all of these books will be down in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!